What's going on, guys? My name is Omega and welcome back to another Apex Legends video. So today I want to talk to you guys about skill-based matchmaking and the truth behind SBMM, because we've had so many people recently complaining about skill-based matchmaking after the release of the Cold War Alpha. For some reason in that game they added skill-based matchmaking and people were freaking out, man. It was trending on Twitter for basically the entire weekend. This led people from Apex, from Valorant, and all different types of games to kind of chime in on what their thoughts were concerning skill-based matchmaking. So in this video I want to talk about what skill-based matchmaking actually is. I also want to show you guys evidence that Apex Legends uses an entirely different form of matchmaking called engagement optimized matchmaking. We're also going to talk about why skill-based matchmaking is currently in the game, the pros of SBMM, the cons of SBMM, and how we can fix skill-based matchmaking. So for those of you guys that don't know what skill-based matchmaking is, it's basically an algorithm in the code that continuously matches you up with people either a little bit better or a little bit worse than you. I'm assuming that it takes into account your KDA, your damage, your accuracy, the time spent alive, and probably a bunch of other stats from your last like 1 or 2 games, and gives you a score that can be used to match you with similarly skilled players. So if in your first game, you drop 20 kills and 4k damage, your second game will probably be much more difficult because you proved in the first game that you were a much higher skill level than those players. Now, when people complain about skill-based matchmaking not working in Apex, they're usually referencing to one of two things. The first one being that the enemies in your game are a much higher skill level than you or your teammates, and that is 100% a problem with the skill-based matchmaking algorithm. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But the second thing they could be referencing is that enemy squads are all partied together while you're playing solo in a squad. Now, this could be an issue with skill-based matchmaking, but I think it's more of an issue that crossplay is not yet in the game, so it's impossible for Respawn to put pre-made squads all in one game, and while solo squads get placed in another game. We just don't have enough players at this moment to be able to do that. Essentially, skill-based matchmaking is supposed to place you in the fairest games possible with people closest to your skill level. However, just a couple months ago, there was actually a paper co-authored by a few EA employees titled An Engagement Optimized Matchmaking Framework. The paper basically stated that the current matchmaking systems have one goal, which is to create as fair of a game as possible. This, I believe, is what is currently in many multiplayer games today. However, it also explained that while this is the most common matchmaking system, it doesn't actually mean that the game will get more engagement from its players. Now, it defined engagement as basically how long someone spent playing the game as well as how much money they spent, and we're talking about microtransactions here. Obviously, that being Apex packs or skins or guns or anything that you want to actually buy in the game. And it also basically proposed that the difficulty of your games should be throttled up and down in order to keep you playing for as long as possible and to spend more money. Now, let me reiterate, this was co-authored by a couple people who worked for EA, and the study that they actually did this on was on a game that EA has called FIFA, which I'm sure you guys all heard of, one of the biggest soccer games out there. Basically, the study that they did in FIFA was they collected data on the win, loss, and ties from recent matches and compared that to what's called the churn risk, which is basically how likely someone is to stop playing after that game. They basically found out that players played the game longer when the recent matches consisted of a mix of wins, losses, and draws. Players who were losing multiple games in a row showed that they quit the game much faster than those who were having a mix of wins, losses, and draws. It also mentioned that winning a bunch of games in a row doesn't even mean that you're going to keep playing, because many people like to end on a high note and they're much more likely to stop playing after they had a couple of really good games. Now, let me reiterate that skill-based matchmaking tries to promote the fairest games, while an engagement optimized matchmaking system is all about the highest engagement possible. It doesn't matter how fair the game is, as long as you are continuing to play it and spending money on it, then the engagement optimized matchmaking framework is doing its job. Now, while this specific study was just done on FIFA, they also mentioned that they could potentially move it to some of EA's other games. They said, so far we've discussed EOMM in 1 vs 1 game scenarios. This framework also applies to PvP games that involve teams of players where every component needs to be extended with additional care. The skill model can be simply applied to a team by adding up skills for all team members. It also said at the very end of the paper, moreover, we can even change the objective function to other core game metrics of interest such as playtime, retention, or spending. So basically what this paper is saying is that skill-based skill-based matchmaking is not the best way to keep people playing your game. It's basically telling us that by drastically changing the difficulty of your games every time you play, that is the best way to keep you playing and to keep you spending more money. Now, this isn't official that this is actually what's being used currently in Apex Legends. Just because this was co-authored by some people at EA, it doesn't mean that EA is using this for all of their games. However, it does make sense because many people, come to the realization that their first game of the day is usually the easiest. After that, it gets much harder because you usually do pretty well your first game. It gets a little bit more difficult towards the middle, and then at the end you might have, a couple more easy and good games. Now, understandably, EA is a business, they want to make money, but from my perspective, this kind of just seems like gambling psychology. Like, you're kind of giving players that high their very first game, making them think that they're doing really well, and then making it extremely difficult for them right after, so they keep grinding. They want to have, that same first game that they had before, and then towards their end of their play session, you kind of make it a little bit easier for them, and that's what kind of keeps them playing for as long as possible. But now let's talk about why skill-based matchmaking is currently in Apex Legends, and specifically why it's just in the random public lobbies that, should basically just be meant for casual play, but it seems like it's just another ranked playlist at this point. So we got a tweet from Alexa Kim, who is the senior game designer at Respawn. She had an opinion on skill-based matchmaking. I wanted to read this tweet to you guys just to give you a little bit of more information. So she said, skill-based matchmaking puts you in with people slightly worse and slightly better than you. So if you do well, you go up, and if you do poorly, you're not utterly trashed. It's specifically made so you'd want to push yourself to consistently move up. She also said, can algorithms improve? Sure, but to reject skill-based matchmaking is to reject competition because you're leaving your outcome up to the random factor of whom you are matched against that round. This got a response from some guy who said, respectively, then why does Apex even have a ranked mode, which is obviously pure form SBMM, but then include it to a degree in public matches? Alexa then responded saying, my guess among other things is it shows your progress more explicitly. So it's made to encourage you to push, while public skill-based matchmaking is there to keep your interest while keeping games fair. Now, keep in mind that Alexa is the senior game designer for Respawn and not specifically for Apex Legends. I'm not sure how much she actually knows about skill-based matchmaking in that game specifically, but she does obviously probably have a good idea of what skill-based matchmaking is supposed to do in FPS. Now, moving on to the pros and cons section, this is kind of where I'm going to start inputting some of my opinions, because most of this video I just want to give you guys facts and kind of let you make your own opinions for yourself, but this is going to be more of kind of my experience and also the experience of other YouTubers, content creators, and just comments I get from you guys from my videos. So starting off with the pros of skill-based matchmaking, we got a whopping 2 that I could come up with right here. So the first one is it helps put newer players into fair lobbies so they don't get shit on by people who've been playing since day one. Now, this is kind of an obvious thing, no new player is going to want to go against a full stacked Predator team. That would basically just make them quit the game and never look back. And that would be really bad for Apex Legends as a whole, because they would lose money, we would get less content, and it would just not end well. Now, the other pro of SBMM is it's also there to help you improve at the game. Now, the idea here is that you are much more likely to learn from your mistakes when going against people who are a higher skill level. You're much less likely to learn from your mistakes if you're just dominating low-level players every single game. So I understand that aspect of it. Do I think it's a perfect system right now? Absolutely not. I think there's a lot of cons with skill-based matchmaking, and that's what I'm going to talk about right now. The first con is that skill-based matchmaking basically promotes an unhealthy and sweaty play style that removes the ability to play casually. You guys know that right now public lobbies seem to be where all of the sweaty tryhards are. It's very hard to actually play casual in this game. Sometimes you even have to go into ranked if you're a low enough rank to be able to get people who just aren't insanely good at this game. So that is one big con that I wanted to mention. Moving on to the second con is that it forces people to play in 3-stack squads, which also hurts the experience for the solo squad with no mics. And I mentioned this earlier in the video, the fact that, we can't really have a separate playlist for people who want to play in squads and people who just want to have, random teammates in their game is definitely a huge problem, and is one thing that could be changed to potentially make a huge difference with skill-based matchmaking. Another con is the range of skill levels seems to be very drastic. Like, I've noticed a lot of times, especially in the gold or platinum rank, there's many times where you're playing in lobbies filled with predators. Now, I want to mention that again, again, skill-based matchmaking usually determines your stats from the last 3 games. So if someone is Season 2 Apex Predator and they didn't play the game for like 8 months after that and just hop back on, they're probably not going to do as well, considering so many things have changed in Apex and it had been so long since they played. So understandably, there are, a couple of times where you might get Predators in your lobbies, especially if you're low level. That usually just means they've had some really bad games and they're basically just performing the same as you. I mean, most of the time, that's at least how it should work. Another con is that it forces good players to make Smurf accounts, which happens a lot, surprisingly. There are many people who are Predators who have made Smurf accounts just to be able to play Apex casually and not to try hard. And obviously, this makes things a lot worse for new players because they think they're going up against people who are their skill level, and hidden behind that gamer tag is someone who's been playing Apex since day one. And the last con I want to touch on is that if Apex does have an engagement optimized matchmaking system, then it's basically using gambling psychology to make you think you're doing really well and then puts you in much harder lobbies to get you playing for as long as possible and spending as much as possible. So these are kind of like my pros and cons of SBMM. I just want to end this video on how I think we can fix skill-based matchmaking for the future. Now, I'm going to give my personal opinion. I do not think skill-based matchmaking should be removed. I actually agree with Alexa on this. It makes zero sense at all to remove skill-based matchmaking because the point of Apex Legends is to improve. It's to get better. It's to have that competitive drive. And if you're always playing against people with no thumbs, it's just, you're gonna look good, but you're really not gonna be that great because you're just stomping noobs. So I personally think skill-based matchmaking should be kept in the game, but it 100% needs to be tweaked. I really wish that, squads who are playing together had a game filled with other squads that they were playing against, and solo players in a squad could play with other solo squads just to make it as fair as possible. And we gotta do something, man, about the fact that public lobbies are just another ranked. Like, it's so weird, the fact that you can hop onto a ranked match and it seems like it's easier than any public lobby you've ever played. So there's many things wrong with skill-based matchmaking, in my opinion, Apex Legends, but I feel like, a lot of people are kind of misconstrued about what skill-based matchmaking actually does and why it's in the game in the first place. Again, I don't think it's perfect. It definitely needs to be improved upon, but let me know down in the comments below what you guys think the most important thing that should be improved with regarding skill-based matchmaking. This is going to be a video that I'm sure so many people are going to have different opinions on, so I definitely want you guys to leave your comment down below in case you have anything to add to this video. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe and like the video if you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys all on the next one. Have a great day. Peace out.